Welcome back to Gale Force Wins Season 4.
Well, folks, this is Gale Force Wins, and I'm very excited today because I'm in the LSPU hall with someone who's incredibly well-known in Newfoundland and Labrador. In fact, he's been on the podcast before when we did some work at the Perchance Theatre. But this one in particular is really, really interesting and really important because Andy has just last night opened up a new, do we call it a play, Andy? Or
yes, I guess so, yep.
So first thing I'm going to do is ask Andy to introduce himself, and we're going to take the conversation from there. Go ahead, Andy, and introduce yourself.
Okay, my name is Andy Jones. I'm an actor and a writer, and I'm from St. John's, Newfoundland, and I've been working on the scene here for about 52 years.
That's amazing for a guy that's only like 60 years old, hey? Well, Andy, we'll delve a little bit into the journey. You're an inspiring individual, you know, and I'm not sure if you know that. The fact that you've been able to have a 52-year career in an industry that, frankly, many don't understand the business side of it. Tell us a little bit about the resilience that you've had to survive 52 years in this industry.
Well, I don't think I was ever planning anything. Like, I never thought of myself seeing into the future. It's like like most of my generation, I think we just threw ourselves at the arts, and we just like no thought of where we were jumping off the cliff, didn't know where we were going to land. And and some people didn't make it, and some people decided to go do other things very, very wisely, I would say, certainly from a financial point of view. But I just kept getting another job and another job, and I kept working at things. So it just devolved or evolved or just kept going.
Yeah. I interviewed a trumpet playing friend of mine one time, and he's one of the best trumpet players in the world. And I said to him, you must practice a lot when you were younger. And he said, to be honest with you, not to sound, arrogant, but he said it came so naturally to me. Let me ask you about that. I mean, you've reached such an incredible pinnacle in your career where you've been able to do things. How hard was it for you to get so good at your craft?
Well, I don't know if I'm good at my craft. I never really understood, I shouldn't be saying this, but I don't know what I'm doing, and I never have. I just, I think it feels to me like I relearn it every time.
Yeah.
I do everything almost differently. I don't know that I've ever come up with a method, that I could hand on to somebody else. I'm not a very good teacher for that reason. So I kind of don't know how I do it. I'm sorry, I wish I had a better answer.
No, you know what? I think it's important. I'm going to tell you a quick story. My nephew said to me one time, I told him that I failed out of a program one time, and he's in his 20s. And you know what he said to me? He goes, "You failed? You failed at something?" I think it's important, Andy, for you to be able to be authentic and share with people that, sometimes you don't really know what you're doing, don't you think?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think, but I mean, I get enough positive feedback to keep working.
Yeah.
So that's good.
So, your career has been on television, movies, and here we are now in the LSPU hall. I'm very curious as to know, what is your love? Is it the feedback of an audience? Is that something that's important to you?
Yeah. Theater, yeah.
Yeah. So theater has driven you for all this time.
Definitely, although I really, really enjoyed doing sketch comedy on TV, where we had lots of license to stop, redo stuff, and we had a wonderful relationship with CBC in Halifax and with Michael Donovan of Salter Street Films. So that was a great experience. And I guess since I was a child, almost I wanted to do sketch comedy on TV, and I got to do it, which is great. I'm glad we joined Canada. And but really, I love theater the most. I think I can't help it. It's so alive. It's such a thrilling thing.
So this is primarily a business podcast that we have, but we've done a lot of work in the arts because we really, really respect the arts.
Yeah.
I want to delve into something because I'm curious. Salter Street Films has been fascinating to me. I know very little about them. Michael Donovan, I've seen the name in the credits. Let's just touch on that a little bit and the effect that they've had in terms of, the ability to let artists be the artistic selves. Talk about that a little.
Well, I would say, Michael Donovan and Paul Donovan, Michael mostly, he really wanted us to go as far as we could in that TV series. Like CBC in Toronto, everyone kept saying, thank God we're not in Toronto. We shot it, all the interiors were shot in Halifax in the studio, and all the exteriors were shot in Newfoundland. Right, so if you went in outside door, you were in Halifax in the studio. And but Michael Donovan wanted us to do. We couldn't go far enough for him, and it was CBC really, in Toronto, who would kind of be the stop thing more than he was. He really felt that we should be, that we were on the edge, and we should go to that edge, and he was really right. I mean, we've been far surpassed in terms of how far we went with stuff now by other things like, South Park and Kids in the Hall or whatever. So yeah, he was very smart. He had that. He was a lawyer and a business guy, but he really had a good feeling for that.
It's interesting, a lawyer and a business guy who invested in artists like you.
Yeah, well, he and like you were saying, he also produced This Hour Has 22 Minutes.
Yeah.
So I mean, that was an incredibly popular TV show. It still is. It's been 35 years or something. And I noticed there's an American show that's very much like it, just starting off now. And so he had that vision. He absolutely had vision.
Mm-hmm. It's not easy to have that vision in a world where immediate returns are important. So yeah, Salter Street Films. Are they still producing?
Salter Street Films, as far as I know, they are in business still, and I presume producing 22 Minutes. But I'm out of that world.
Yeah. Let me ask you this: you have a very entrepreneurial slant to you. I think any artist that I've ever met has that entrepreneurial slant. When you sit here and this is just you, and we'll get into this in a minute. There's a lot of pressure on you to make this work, hey?
Yes, there is. Yeah. It's a lot of pressure.
So the business side of it is on your mind?
Definitely, and there's no doubt that every single artist is like every Newfoundland fisherman is a small business person, and like artists are also like we're looking for work, we're selling ourselves, we're publicizing ourselves, and we have to pay workers' comp, and we have to pay HST, and we have to do our accounts and do our books and all that stuff. So we do all that, and we also have to produce the actual content too. Now, some people get to the point where they don't have to do that anymore, but most of us have to keep working on that level.
I just find the similarities to business. Well, you are a business. Well, you've just outlined, those are really challenging things to do, because I know from my perspective, I'm probably more creative than the business side. And those, the HST and this and that is just monotonous. But I feel that when you do that, it allows you to let your craft speak for itself. I think that's the only reason that I endure the pain of that monotonous work. Would that be something that you can relate to?
Yes, I think so. Yeah, you have to keep your stuff in order, otherwise you won't be able to do anything.
No. So, Andy, we've skipped around a lot, but we're here at the LSPU Hall, and you had an opening night last night.
Yes, yeah.
First of all, tell us the name of the play, and we're going to delve into this a little bit here now.
Okay. So the show is called Don't Give Up on Me, Dad, and it's really a show about our son, Louie, and his struggles. He had many struggles in his life. What I would say is struggles of the heart, the soul, the brain, and the mind. And he eventually took his own life in 2014. And so I really wanted to do something about him, to memorialize him in a way, I guess, and to tell his story, and also to tell some of the story of his journey through the mental health system.
So I know you had the opening night last night, and tell us a little bit about that. I off camera, you mentioned it was a little bit challenging, and I can only imagine. What I'll first of all say is that, Andy, courageous. This is incredibly courageous to put yourself on stage talking about this topic, but just talk a little bit about, first impressions.
Well, you talk about that. I mean, like, I think that our son went through incredible human suffering, and there's no doubt about that in my mind. Like, there's no romance involved when you have, I think, when you have schizophrenia. There's no romance involved when you have extreme obsessive compulsive disorder, and these are people who live lives of great anguish. Yeah. And so, what I'm doing is very, very minor compared to that, like a little bit of stress about doing a show and stuff like that. But really the courage came from people like that who live their lives and live with that.
So how old was Louie?
Louie was 28 when he died. Yeah, he was
Wow.
just 3 weeks, 28 years old.
So you had Louie for 28 years.
Yeah.
And blessed you and your wife for 28 years.
Yeah. He was a great guy, and we loved him, of course, incredibly. And of course, the fact is that this is like the major event of our lives.
Yeah.
There's no doubt about it that everything in my life is before February 14th, 2014, and after February 14th, 2014.
So you've created a play. How long was this play in your head, and how long did it take you to put together?
Oh my God! I sort of started very shortly after he died. Bill McGilvery, a Halifax filmmaker, approached me very shortly. He said, "Would you like to make a documentary about Louie or something?" And I said, "Yes, I think that's a good idea." And then I even, that's when I got his medical records, and I did a little outline for it, and then I crashed, and I just realized, I guess I was still in shock.
When was this?
This was months after he died.
Oh, months.
Yeah, so like
still
really
very fresh.
It was very fresh, and I was really, I wasn't, in touch with reality in some way. But then, about 3 years later, in around 2017, I decided to see if I could do some research about his condition, which again was, although he had many diagnoses, unfortunately, over the years, but obsessive compulsive disorder of an extreme form, which is having intrusive thoughts, really horrendous and painful and awful human thoughts go through your head, and this is quite a phenomenon. I didn't really get it completely until I started to research it.
Yeah.
And then at that point I said, I'm going to try to do something to get the message out. And that's when I started. And then by in 2017 I started. So I worked until I finally opened in 2023.
Wow. I just think, I've interviewed a lot of people. We've had about 1,700 interviews in 4 years, and mental health, particularly since the pandemic, is something that comes up, and in surprising places, frankly. Last night I had a chat with a guy, recorded a conversation, who came through the church, was a pastor, very, very successful in business, but had a 6-month period where he thought about committing suicide. And it just struck me that this is something that anyone could fall victim to, right?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
And Andy, I think it's an important conversation. I know myself. I came through a period where my dad died when I was 14, and I said this. I thought about it this way. It wasn't until I turned 26, 12 years later, that the winters weren't as cold. And I'm trying to paint a picture that when I was in a challenging time trying to come to grips with the fact that my dad died, I felt that the winters were cold. And now I find the winters not as cold because I have coping strategies, Tell us a little bit about some of your coping strategies.
That's an interesting thing you say there about, I have associations like that with Louie and things in Louie's life. In fact, I talk about that in the show. But I did go to see a grief counselor, not right away, but about maybe a year, I think, later. And that's when and he's a wonderful guy in St. John's, down at the Miller Center, at the General Hospital. So I did that. And I also did some meditation. I did some mindfulness meditation. But in a way, we just sort of, and we, Mary Lynn, my partner, and I supported each other. We did go public right away, which I think helped us. We didn't hide the fact that he had taken his own life. And I was determined to sort of break through this silence thing.
Yeah.
And I think we somehow or other, I'm not sure about any of this stuff because I'm not an expert, but it seems to be like we got to start talking about it.
Well, I'm going to say this to you, that silence piece is tough, and it's probably tougher on someone who's looking in, as like me, knowing the topic today. I'll be honest with you, I was a bit nervous because not necessarily my expertise, as I said, we're an inspirational business type podcast.
Yeah.
But what I find, like when we talk about business bankruptcies, the conversation around coming out of that is very, very inspirational. So it's funny, what comes to mind is my mom never did do grief counseling. So my dad was dead for 44 years. She died in June of 2021. 2 weeks before she died, Andy, she was given a 2-week window to live because she was on dialysis and they stopped it anyway. My point I'm getting to here is that she decided, okay, I'll go to a grief counselor. I'll go to a counselor. 2 weeks before she died. She was 84 years of age. But it was incredibly helpful for me and my sister because 44 years we were trying to navigate through the grief. And I guess part of what I'm saying is that a lot of people are not willing to take that step. So kudos to you,
Did you
your partner.
Go yourself to see a grief counselor?
It was online because it was in the pandemic. I was there and listened, and I came to understand a whole host of things about my reaction to my dad dying when I was 14. What I'm getting to here is that I think too many people have this pride thing, I don't need that. And I see that in a lot of my mother-in-law and my mom, I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about that, like the decision to go. Did you come upon that yourself? Did your partner say, come on, Andy? Did people around you? Like, how did you come to that decision to go to a grief counselor?
I think I really was, like I said, I was kind of in shock for such a long time. This is my possible version of my past events. I never know. But, and then I spoke to someone else. I spoke to two people who had actually seen the same guy. And I'll say his name. His name is Peter Burns. He's a wonderful guy. He's retired, well, semi-retired anyway. But, and two people of quite different people said to me, that they had talked to him. And so I said, I think I'm going to give this a try. And I'm really glad I did. Mm-hmm. It really made a big difference. Yeah.
Well, we as a society need to be able to lean on people like that have studied this, that have the strategies, because navigating through grief is very, very difficult. And
it is.
Like I find, sorry for interrupting you, the part I find hard is going on, continuing, and I almost have a bit of guilt. Oh, should I be happy if that person is no longer with us? I don't know if that's something that you experience, but
yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
That's I would say when it's your child who dies. Not that it matters, but anyone who dies. But I felt very guilty about enjoying anything. Took me a long time to get through that. Yeah.
I'm going to ask you a question. I don't know if it's a tough question or not. I'm sitting here with you. The chairs are empty. If Louie was sitting in the audience with you, what do you think he'd be saying about this play?
I have Louie in the show. I talked to him, and the only thing I can really come up with for him to say is, "You could never imagine what I would want to say anyway, Dad."
Yeah.
Because I think that in the end, what my vision of the past is fiction. In the way I fictionalize it, because I have no idea what he would say.
Yeah, it's hard. Let me ask you this. When we do these interviews, we ask people to give a piece of advice, and some people find that tough. But I mean, you've been through a lot, Andy. You've got an incredible career, and this is something that's a challenge. What kind of advice would you give to anyone maybe to be struggling, or a parent that has someone who's struggling? What would you give? It's hard to nail something down, I know.
It really is. And, I do think there are people who can help. And sometimes you have to go and try 2 or 3 people, because the first person might not be the right one. But sometimes the person who seems like they're not the right person turns out to be the right person, if you can just last long enough. That's happened to me a couple of times. I guess that you have to share, I think, your feelings, and find someone that you can share them with. It doesn't have to be a professional necessarily, but a friend or someone. And also you have to rant. If you can rant once or twice, find someone who you can relax enough with to rant and rave a bit.
Yeah, I like that. So I put you on the spot with that, and you may say no to what I'm going to ask you here now, but is there a very short piece of the play that you could actually do right now? And if not, we didn't talk about this in advance. I'm really putting you on the spot. But if there was one part of it that you could just show us, is that something that you could do?
Well, I could just do one. During the show, I introduced Saint Dymphna, who was a real saint, a Catholic saint. My mother used to pray to Saint Dymphna. She was the patron saint of those with mental and nervous disorders. And so she kind of comes through my show a bit, and I talked to her a few times, and she sort of pronounces a few times on what's going on. One thing that she says is, I feel sometimes it's very difficult for sometimes somebody who is a medical doctor and who has, a certain kind of drive, to understand someone who has what they call a mental illness or whatever. And so St. Dymphna says during the show, I asked her for her advice, and I don't know if this makes sense, but she says, oh, doctor, it takes so much grit to become a doctor, enormous self-motivation. And it requires, dare I say it, it requires lots of people telling you that the sun shines out of your arse, which some days it does. But it must be very difficult, I know, doctor, to understand someone like Louie, who is too crushed to get out of bed, even when the rats are knocking at the door.
Andy, it is an absolute pleasure to sit with you. This is obviously tough for you to do, but you're doing it with a sense of humor and a really important message. Last question, what are the show times without knowing all the exact ones?
The show runs from the 10th actually yesterday, to the 20th of October. So for the next 2 weeks at the LSPU Hall of October. And then it runs from the Arts and Culture Centres starting on the 25th in Stephenville, right across the province. And then we're going to Labrador in early November 2nd, I think, to Labrador City. And then we're going to do a 10-show outreach tour to coastal Labrador, to all the small communities. We're going to fly in, fly out. And I have a slightly shorter version. We can't, unfortunately, do the show is too technical, unfortunately. But we're going to do that version, which I've already done 8 times in St. John's at various locations.
Wow, that's amazing. Andy, thank you for sitting with Gale
Okay,
Force
thank you.
Wins.
Yep.
It's an absolute pleasure
Great
to
to-
sit with you. Your career and the culmination of this work is something that the province needs. It's an important topic, folks. What we need more of is more Andy Jones. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for tuning in to Gale Force Wins. That's Gale Force Wins, WINS.com.